This video was produced to bring awareness to the Climate Change Risk Map Storyboard. This project sets out to discover what climate change will mean for us in Union Island. How will it affect us, and what we as Unionites can do about it? Climate change describes the changes in the average climatic conditions, such as temperature and rainfall.
May, June, July, we should have plenty heavy rain with thunder and lightning. And these routes used to want to bed and hide because you could thunder with lightning.
Now, as we don't know when it's going to rain and when it's not going to rain, it's very difficult to predict. And so this change in our season, our wet and dry season, has to be attributed to something.
The climate models are showing that over the next 60 years, days will become hotter and drier. By 2080, the lowest average day temperature could be 29 degrees Celsius, or 84.2 degrees Fahrenheit, compared to today, which is just 26 degrees Celsius. This change could impact the health of humans, plants, and animals. By 2080, an average of just as little as 50 centimeters of rain could fall in a year. In 1994, building work started on a marina complex in Ashton Lagoon that was abandoned before completion. For many years, the foundation of the marina negatively impacted the natural flow and flushing of seawater through the lagoon, with negative consequences for the water quality and biodiversity. This kind of development can significantly bring negative environmental impacts and can also change the access and the livelihood options of local persons.
The mangrove is very, very useful in terms of livelihood on Union Island. It protects a lot of young marine life. Lobsters will come there, lay and make the young ones and leave them and go away. Now, because of the foot of the black mangrove, it's so entangled that the juvenile lobsters, juvenile fish, even sharks live within there and being protected from bigger prey.
It is important that we learn how to avoid overdevelopment and poor planning decisions that have raised conflicts and problems for local communities on other islands in the region.
They tend to lose this little island, especially Union Island, and up to the other islands in the Grenadines, if there are not much of a mechanism in place, or if they're not educating education awareness in schools, from primary schools up to the government level, where they understand the whole impact of climate change, we will not have a future.
Approximately 2,000 people live on Union Island. Ashton and Clifton are the largest settlements. But what level and type of development is best suited for our small island to support its population? Using local knowledge and personal experience, the evolution of the habitats were reimagined on Union Island to see what they might look like following two possible paths of continued tourism development. One path follows in the footsteps of other island destinations, with large tourism developments across the island, as well as a lot of new roads and a large marina. A goat population which remains unchecked, where their grazing destroys the undergrowth of the forests and shrubs. The other way is based on an ecotourism model, where there are still tourism developments, but these are at a smaller scale and cover less of the island's surface area.
I do think that nature-based tourism could work, because that is one of the main things that we have to offer here on Union Island in terms of marine life and forest life.
I think a good model is ecotourism. Commercial tourism might be a little too much for us, because in terms of impact, in terms of land space, in terms of what those type of tourists want. When you have small islands like this, people come for the beauty, they come for the nature, they do come for sea, sun, and sand, but they also come for those unique things. For example, just hanging out with somebody by their house and cooking wangu. That's food tourism. Union Island has a good food culture here. So why not have all those food lovers and food bloggers come to the island where they could cook wangu and fish and crab and things like that. So these are the ecotourism that you can invest in.
What other differences can you see? Drag the slider left to right. The left image is the development scenario with hotels, villas, and goats. The right side is the ecotourism scenario with smaller properties, trails, and footpaths. We all depend on the natural, terrestrial, coastal, and marine ecosystem to protect us from the impacts of climate change. For example, forests cool the local air temperature, and the coral reefs help to protect the beach and the shoreline from stormy waters. Coral reefs are the main source of sand for our beaches. Without healthy coral, parrotfish cannot graze on the coral and poop out fresh sand. Since the 1970s, over 50% of our reef-building corals have been lost. Many scientists agree this is due to many issues, including overfishing of reef fish species, land-based sources of pollution, and outbreak of coral and sea urchin diseases. Protecting these ecosystems will help to protect the island, its infrastructure, and private property. This project used satellite imagery, the latest scientific models, and joined with local knowledge to find out what's working well to help protect us here in Union Island. Where are the risks? What impact the different habitat scenarios have, and what can be done to protect the island in the future? What follows are some of the modeling results. You will see the state of the island as it is today, but also the effects different environmental scenarios could have in the future. Drought is a long dry period without rain. When it does rain, the water sinks into the soil. The amount of water any soil holds depends on the amount of organic material, mainly from decomposing vegetation and rock type it is on. This is called the soil water holding capacity. Maintaining a high soil water holding capacity means when a drought does occur, there's a good reserve of water available for vegetation to tap into, and it increases the chances of their survival. All crops are less likely to die, and grazing pastures continue to feed our goats.
When you get into the forest, you feel like you're in a different world. You feel just cool, just relaxed. You feel happy to be in a place in the forest. When I get into the forest, it's cooler. And what I notice, sometimes you're out here and out here is dry. When you get into the forest, to the entrance of the forest, you see like rain just fall off. Rain still falling there. And the forest, when the rain falls in the forest, the rain doesn't just fall on the ground and run off. It take the time run on the body of the trees, and it helps to soak down to the soil.
This map shows the areas on Union Island that help keep a high soil water holding capacity. You can see that the best areas are in and around Chatham Bay. The groundwater recharge that healthy forests provide is historically why the forest reserves were created above Chatham Bay and on other islands in the region to help to maintain better water security. Under a business-as-usual tourism scenario, clearing the dry forest removes valuable drought-resistant and deep-rooted trees. More man-made surfaces stop water from flowing down into the soil.
We had a very clear and defined dry season and a clear and defined wet season. Now our dry seasons are longer and it's not as defined because you don't know when it's going to happen and we don't know when rain is going to come.
More goats eat more of the forest undergrowth, reducing the number of roots that funnel water into the ground.
Because there isn't much water, they allow them to roam and they are very destructive. They eat, especially the goats, they eat almost everything. Farmers who like to plant corn and peas and other crop, they are unable to do so because those animals would go in their fences or break their fences and they would eat everything.
With the ecotourism scenario, most of the forests around the eco-properties remain intact. Better goat management means more undergrowth across the island, resulting in more leaves and roots to collect and funnel water into the ground. Using the slider on the map, you can see the difference between the two scenarios. The left-hand map shows the impact traditional tourism could have on refilling soil water. The right-hand map shows the impact ecotourism could have. In summary, the more vegetation we maintain on Union Island, the more moisture our soil can hold, and the better off we are to handle the dry season. Soil erosion is where valuable topsoil is moved from one area to another. It is a natural, slow process. The topsoil, which is rich in carbon, is the best for growing plants and crops. Once the soil is gone, it's very difficult to get it back naturally. The loss of topsoil reduces the growth of grass for grazing or other crops and natural vegetation. Eroded soil flows into waterways and causes blockages and localized flooding.
Well, the water used to run in a place called Big Park. When you go in, before you reach that bay, as I told you about, you come along that corner, water used to come down the hill. Our land was so, and right back, there was more or less the water used to make its own pathway to run off, and it goes all the way down to the sea. I guess water still comes down there, in the same place in Jerome. Yes, because I have a niece that lives along that section, and she told me lots of waters come down this along where she lives.
If this sediment reaches the sea, it can smother corals and seagrasses, causing them to get sick, which in turn impacts the fish population. The map shows the areas at risk of soil erosion. The areas most at risk are less vegetated areas, such as the recently cleared forests. The worst areas are the steeper slopes. Thankfully, in many areas, there is still a lot of vegetation, like the dry forests and the shrubs, both of which protect against soil erosion. In other areas, however, such as along the roadsides, where the goats are most prevalent, with a business-as-usual scenario, there's a lot of vegetation loss from more land being cleared. Less vegetation means fewer roots holding on to soil, which can now wash away. More goats mean even thinner areas of vegetation. All that extra topsoil can flow into the sea, harming marine life.
It has basically became an area of moss, dark moss, and used to see different species in there, like octopus and stuff like that. And now it is so dark and unattractive that it's saddening.
With a more ecotourism scenario, a lot of the vegetation remains intact and stabilizes the soil. Where goat management has been put into place and the undergrowth restored, the risk of erosion has significantly decreased as more roots help hold the soil in place. Around the world, ice sheets and glaciers are melting. Most of that melted water flows into the sea. This is one more reason why sea levels are rising. Sea level rise is a big threat to small islands, as there are usually a lot of homes and hotels on the coast.
Sand mining used to be a very serious problem in the past. That's the way how we construct houses here before, or any sort of building. Even the road construction by government used to use the sand from the beach also, right? We never knew of that will have an impact on us today, because in the past that's what we use. But today we are seeing evidence of the impact of removing the sand from the beach. And presently now they are trying their best to try and stop people from taking sand from the beach. But we have to remember, if you don't educate people and if you don't support or give them some form of help, people will still go out there and taking sand from the beach.
Some scientists think that sea levels might be more than 1 meter high by 2080. At this time, 97 buildings would be in the sea, and 49 roads or tracks would have to be moved. Water levels can get even higher from the high tides and the storm surges. Use the slide on the map to see the difference in sea level between today and a 6-meter storm surge on top of a 1.3-meter sea rise in 2080, which is on the right.
60 years ago compared to today, There's a lot of changes. A lot of our land is now in the sea.
Natural coastal habitats are great at reducing the size and speed of storm waves, helping to reduce the damage to coastal homes, businesses, and roads. Coral reefs and sand dunes can act as a physical barrier. Mangrove habitats are thick and dense and help to break up the waves and absorb storm surges. Climate change is making storms and hurricanes more powerful. Larger hurricanes mean more powerful storm surges. The map on the right shows the most vulnerable areas to storm surge. Most hurricanes currently come from the east, so that side of the island is more at risk. Luckily, coral reefs help protect the main settlement. Ashton is helped by mangroves as well. If their health continues to deteriorate, their protective abilities are reduced.
In Richmond, they cut down a lot of the mangrove trees. And because the mangrove trees cut down, especially in Big Sand area, a lot of the mangroves are cut down. And because of that, we're having a lot of coastal erosion taking place in that area.
If it was 3 square miles in size, we could be like 2.8, 2.6, 2.7, because we've been losing land all the time.
Under a business as usual scenario, the higher erosion levels, more soil is washed into the sea, damaging the reefs and reducing their protection against storm surges. Under an ecotourism scenario, there's less erosion, so less sediment covering the reefs. And this type of tourism attracts visitors who are more likely to want to support local coral restoration efforts, which can over time help reefs to recover. Protected and expanded mangrove habitats help reduce the strength of the storm waves. As a result, Ashton and Big Sands are better protected. Use the slider to see the impact the different scenarios have on coastal vulnerability.
And the prediction is that there's a certain area between 2025 and 2050 will be completely underwater around the coastline of Union Island. And I don't think much people know of that, but that is something I know, and that is something I'm watching, and I'm seeing it taking place gradually. Because I can see the difference in the rise in the tide. Every year, I pay close attention to this. So what I'm saying here is not because I just want to say it, I'm saying it because of observation.
Ecosystem-based adaptation is a process where we work with nature to help protect our communities from rising sea levels and storm surges. The more coral reefs, seagrass, and mangroves that we can restore along our coast, the better protected we are. Climate change is happening, and it will impact you and your community. We all have a role to play in reducing the amount of energy and water we consume, as well as planning for our future. Many voices are louder than one, and community groups like the Union Island Environmental Alliance, formerly Union Island Environmental Attackers, will have a lot of projects that you can get involved in and lend your voice to.
I would suggest that we don't build too close to the beaches. We'll protect our beach because, I mean, you cannot expect to remove mangrove reefs and all those things just to do big infrastructure like hotel and those things. I suggest that people should do some cottages that are more eco-friendly but far away from the seafront, build more up on the land. So at least that, I believe that's the reason why to planning have some building laws, and because people are not abiding by them, they believe being closer to the beach give them more money. But I believe if we build far away from the beach, it gives you a sense of a proper ownership when it comes to protecting the environment. We have turtle, we have our marine life out there. Turtle feed on jellyfish, and when turtle see like clear plastic, but they'll take them for jellyfish, they'll choke on them. So I believe that a sense of ownership need to be what should I say, properly kept, or give pride into what you do in order to attract tourists. Yes, you want white sand beaches, but you can also build more on the upper land so you can protect what goes into the sea.
With less rain and higher temperatures, there will be more drought years and more erosion, causing dry soil to end up in the sea. There are things you can do to encourage rainwater to soak into the soil.
In the case of like Chatham Bay, where some of the lands are sloped, you will more plant to anchor the topsoil, so at least the grass would be in place and you would not have much runoff into the sea. Like for instance, on slopeland you plant vetiver grass. So that would be able to hold the soil in place. So when the rain comes, the rainwater will be trapped in those areas instead of just running off and taking away your topsoil that would take it down into the ocean. And the water will stay more upper on the hills. And if you have plants, vegetables and things like that, they will be in that area where you have even better fruits and vegetables to eat, rather than just having the water just washing away everything from our soil that runs down into the ocean.
Plant and protect large trees, especially drought-resistant species such as gumbalimba, white cedar, tamarind, and lucas, which also provide food sources for various wildlife species. Help restore the shrubs and forests by controlling where goats graze. Control grazing on hills and slopes. This is where the most erosion happens from surface runoff. If you own grassland for grazing, planting native trees every 30 meters helps a lot and will provide shades for the animals so they can survive with less water. Encourage the use of stepping stones and permeable paving to stop water flowing away or direct runoff to water storage containers.
Because you used to have more rain, you used to have a lot of people planting their backyard garden, even whether it's to the front or the back, or planting with a neighbor, because at that time people used to also fence their property. But time and season change, as they say, and we recognize that even in Union Island, climate change is right here in Union Island, because we notice that we are having shortage of rain and longer dry season. Because I remember in 2012 was the most severe drought we ever have, where they have to rush on water to Union Island, and some people didn't get, and people think that because they have more storage at home, they should get more of the water, while other people just only have 2 drums. But one of the things that we recognize is that, you know what, we need to do a study to see what is causing some of the problems. And one of the problems we recognize is that people cut down wood to make charcoals, because they sell it back to people who do barbecue and what's that. But then they're not replanting any trees. So because they're not doing any replanting, then trees attract rain. So if there's nothing like that in place to attract the rain, what do you think is going to happen? The place is going to be very dry, and that is part of the reason. So to solve this problem, I think that every time you want to do construction and like cutting of trees to make coals, you should replant a tree back in the area. Or if you're cutting down a piece of land where you're going to build, I think around the boundaries you should plant some trees that can attract the rain.
Rising sea levels will start to flood coastal homes, with even more damage caused by storm surges. Check if your property is at risk from flooding. Check to see if nearby schools, roads, hospitals might be affected. Help protect and even expand wetland habitats such as mangroves and ponds. Please follow national laws and do not catch and eat parrotfish. These laws were enacted to protect these very important species as they keep the reef healthy by grazing the reef, and in doing so, produce fresh sand to nourish our beaches. Do not develop on land that might be flooded in the future. Encourage other landowners and developers to keep the coastal environment intact. This project was carried out by Environment Systems Limited, with assistance from the GIS unit of the Government of St. Vincent and the Grenadines Forestry Department and the Union Island Environmental Alliance. The project was carried out on behalf of Fauna and Flora International, who are the world's oldest international conservation organization dedicated to protecting the world's threatened wildlife and habitats.